There was a time when Lorie Singer felt impossible to miss. In the early 1980s, she arrived with something unusual even by Hollywood standards. She was not just another young actress being packaged for the moment. She had the face the camera remembered, the intensity of someone trained for the stage, and a real classical music background that gave her a kind of gravity most young stars were still trying to imitate. First came Fame, then came Footloose, and for a while, Lorie Singer seemed like exactly the kind of actress who would stay at the center of American pop culture for years. And yet, for many viewers, that is the mystery. Because if you remember the 1980s clearly, you remember her. You remember the presence, the stillness, the intelligence, the rebellious edge. But then, somewhere along the way, she stopped being one of the names people talked about every week. She did not become a tabloid fixture. She did not turn herself into a nostalgia machine. She did not keep chasing visibility at all costs. Which leaves the real question hanging in the air. Where is Lorie Singer now, and what really happened after the fame faded? The first clue is that Lorie Singer was never built in the usual Hollywood way. She was born into a family shaped by music. Her father, Jacques Singer, was a conductor. Her mother, Lorie Singer, was a concert pianist. Lorie made her debut as a cello soloist with the Oregon Symphony when she was just 13, and at 14 she was admitted to Juilliard to study cello. Long before mass audiences knew her as Ariel Moore, she had already lived inside a world of discipline, performance, and very high standards. That matters, because it helps explain something essential about her later life. Lorie Singer did not come from a background that treated celebrity as the highest possible prize. Even after acting took off, music remained central to how she saw herself. That is not the profile of someone whose identity depended entirely on staying famous. It is the profile of someone who already had another inner life before the cameras arrived. Even her breakthrough carried that dual quality. On television, Fame gave her an ideal entry point. She played Julie Miller, a character that fit her real abilities, combining performance with musicianship. It made her legible to audiences very quickly. She was young, talented, serious, and believable. But Fame also introduced her to the machinery of public attention early. She was not just performing, she was beginning to represent a type. The gifted, soulful young woman whose talent seemed deeper than the room around her. Then Footloose arrived, and everything became larger. Released in 1984, Footloose became a cultural event. The soundtrack was huge, the film was a hit, and Lorie Singer's Ariel Moore became one of those characters that lived beyond the movie itself. She was rebellious, wounded, romantic, dangerous, and vulnerable all at once. Audiences felt that. She was not playing a generic love interest. She gave Ariel a restlessness that made the character feel like the emotional center of the film. That success should have made the next chapter simple. Instead, it made it more complicated. Because once an actress becomes identified with a defining role that early, the gift and the trap can arrive together. Lorie Singer followed Footloose with films that showed range, including The Falcon and the Snowman, The Man with One Red Shoe, and especially Trouble in Mind, which earned her an Independent Spirit Award nomination. Later came Shortcuts, Robert Altman's acclaimed ensemble film. These were not random credits. They showed that she was drawn to directors and projects with a more searching, character-driven quality. But that is also where the story becomes more revealing. The public often remembers stars through the biggest hit, not through the best choices that followed. Footloose made Lorie Singer famous, but it may also have fixed her in the public imagination in a way that later work could not easily replace. And by the mid-1980s, Hollywood was not exactly generous to actresses who did not fit neatly into one marketable lane. Lorie Singer had beauty, but she also had seriousness. She had pop appeal, but she also had the instincts of a musician and a character actress. That combination can make someone memorable, but it can also make them harder for the industry to simplify. The record does not give a single dramatic explanation for why she became less visible. What it suggests instead is something quieter and more familiar, a career shaped by selective choices, changing trends, and an industry that does not always know what to do with women who refuse to become one-dimensional. That is why the middle of Lorie Singer's story is not really about collapse. It is about drift, redirection, and a different relationship to ambition. She kept working. There were films in the late 1980s and early 1990s, then the TV series VR.5 in the mid-1990s, and later projects that connected back to her original training, including Inspired by Bach, where she acted and played cello. The visibility changed, yes, but the work never entirely stopped. What changed was the kind of presence she seemed willing to have. She was no longer being sold as the next big thing, and she did not appear to fight desperately to stay in that lane. The turning point, then, was less a scandal than a separation. Public memory froze Lorie Singer in the era of Fame and Footloose, while Lorie Singer herself kept moving into a more selective, less commercial life. In 2008, she performed as a soloist at Carnegie Hall. In the 2000s, she moved into documentary work, serving as an executive producer on Mea Maxima Culpa, Silence in the House of God, a film that later won a Peabody, and she narrated God Knows Where I Am. Those are not the choices of someone clinging to old teen idol status. They are the choices of someone using her voice, reputation, and artistic background in a different way. And that leads to the answer people are really looking for. Lorie Singer did not vanish. She became selective. As of the last few years, she has remained publicly active, though far from overexposed. Her official site highlights her starring role in Rachel Hendricks, released in 2023, and also notes later projects in development and post-production. It also shows that she has continued to perform music, including a live classical performance in 2023. And in 2024, she gave multiple interviews for the 40th anniversary of Footloose, speaking warmly and thoughtfully about the film rather than running from it. That matters. Some stars spend later life trying to erase the role that made them famous. Lorie Singer seems to regard hers with perspective, not desperation. So where is Lorie Singer now? By the public record, she is still working, still artistically engaged, and still connected to both acting and music. She is simply doing it on different terms, not as a constant celebrity presence, not as a fixture of gossip culture, not as someone endlessly performing her own past for attention. She appears when the work or the moment matters, and otherwise seems content to live outside the old machinery that once made her famous. And maybe that is the deeper truth behind her story. For some actors, fading from the center of fame looks like failure only if fame is the only measure that counts. But Lorie Singer's life suggests another possibility, that a person can step out of the loudest part of the spotlight and still remain an artist. That a career can change shape without losing meaning. That the woman audiences remember from Footloose did not simply disappear into silence. She returned again and again in different forms, as an actress, a musician, a producer, a narrator. Just not always in the places where mass culture bothered to keep looking. So what really happened after the fame faded? Maybe the simplest answer is the most honest one. Lorie Singer did not spend the rest of her life trying to remain the version of herself that Hollywood found easiest to sell in 1984. She kept going, but she kept going as herself. And for a performer who came from discipline before glamour, music before celebrity, and craft before noise, that may not be a sad ending at all. It may be the most revealing part of the story.